Hello, this is Lewis from Vera Filosofia, and today I want to do something a little bit different from what I've done in the last few videos. Today I want to share something very special. A few months ago, while I was going through a rough patch in my life, I discovered, developed, and then wrote down a text about a technique that I came up with. This is, so far as I'm concerned, the most powerful technique or exercise that you can integrate into your life to see radical changes, not only on the outside, but more importantly, in who you are. So I wanted to share this with you. The text was a bit too long for me to memorize, and I didn't want to miss any of the details because I think it was well written. So I'm going to read it out loud to you, and I hope you really enjoy it. The text is in its very raw format, which means it's written by hand here in a notebook I've got, and I am going to read it out loud to you. So I hope you enjoy it, and here we go. Relationships are an integral part of our life. We all have family, friends, work colleagues, peers, romantic partners, as well as relationships to our community, society, and environment. Every one of these relationships is unique and special because each affects us in a different way, shaping our life for better or worse. Accordingly, we want to have good relationships, and there are millions of books, courses, coaches, therapists, indeed entire industries dedicated to this aspect of our life and how to improve it, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. Yet, the most central and most important of these relationships is often overlooked, and that is the relationship we have with ourselves. Strange as it may sound, we do have a relationship with ourselves, just as we do with everyone else. We talk with ourselves, even if only in our heads. We take care of ourselves, or not. And we do all sorts of activities, make decisions, etc., that will determine the quality of our lives. While people worry about improving their relationships they have with other people, the fact is that regardless of all their efforts, all those relationships will eventually end. One can change jobs, cities, and even countries. We all graduate from school and university, and one may have a falling out with one's friends, grow distant, or make some new friends, as often happens. One's partner may want a divorce or to break up, and even those people who we've known our whole lives, our parents, our siblings, and our beloved pets, just like everyone else, will at some point grow old and die. Every relationship you have is doomed to end, except for one, and that is the relationship you have with yourself. Now, the relationship you have with yourself, more than a mere fallback position, is one's ground level of happiness and satisfaction. It determines the way one relates to everyone and everything else. If one doesn't have self-love, one will have no love to give and will not feel loved by others, just in the same way that if you do not respect yourself, nobody else will. Now, in her book Alonement, Francesca Spector deals with the most important relationship, the one you have with yourself. And she does this through the concept of alonement, a concept she coined for the quality time one spends with oneself. In the book, she talks about the bias society has towards extroversion and socializing, while at the same time frowning upon time spent on one's own. She talks about self-care, doing things that make one happy, trying out new things, and learning to enjoy time and activities alone, regardless of one's relationship status. She talks about self-knowledge and prioritizing one's life. Now, while the book and the concept of alonement may be great I don't think Spectre goes to the core of the issue. For even though alonement, as quality time with oneself, taking care of one's needs, exploring new things, going new places, doing things that make you happy, as well as pampering oneself, are very important to live a good life and living a self-dependent life, time alone can and must be dedicated to self-knowledge. And alonement can only build on the knowledge we have of who we are already. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I know who I am. I am, after all, me. What no one seems to understand is that we get to know ourselves in the same way we get to know other people, namely a posteriori, meaning through experience. Now, though everyone knows himself to some degree because we experience our own thoughts, emotions, the consequences of our actions, our desires, and indeed one's life on a daily basis, this is all superficial knowledge, and one is usually too busy living and never stops to reflect on one's experiences for any significant length of time. It's similar to the relationship we have with our work colleagues or with our gym buddies. Moreover, our first-person experience is inherently subjective, which is why, in the moment, we don't seem to be able to determine things or think about things objectively. So, just because you are acquainted with yourself does not mean that that you know yourself. And many people don't know what they want or why it is that they do what they do. Now, furthermore, the fact that you are you does not mean that you get along with yourself. This to the degree that many people take any chance they get to spend time alone and go out of their way to avoid being alone by making plans or distracting themselves or just doing anything but. Solitude is what I call being alone in your own company without any activities or distractions. Many so-called introverts say they need alone time. But when you ask them what they do when they're alone, they often say, well, watching films, reading, listening, or playing to music, working, painting, meditating, or other activities. In a word, they are doing alonement. They are spending quality time with themselves, one could say. And these things, however, can be a distraction, a way of avoiding really being alone with yourself. This reluctance to be alone by oneself is not something new. And although modern technology provides us with an endless supply of distractions, such as social media, videos, and streaming, and music, and video games, etc., human beings have always found ways to avoid the discomfort of being alone. Through work, through socializing, through games, through alcohol, etc., which are all primarily used to drive off boredom, but also serve as a good excuse to not spend time in solitude. Indeed, solitude, in the way I have spoken about it so far, sounds rather boring and akin to doing nothing, which is why it is so counterintuitive to do it. Yet, solitude is a fertile ground for self-discovery, self-acceptance, self-love, and self-knowledge, and consequently, for self-development. When we hear someone say, I'm working on myself, what do they usually mean by that? It's not too clear. Reading books, watching videos, taking courses, basically acquiring information, and then either doing nothing or trying to change somehow by applying this information. But the best forms of self-development is where one reflects on oneself, either on one's own or with some guide, as might be with a therapist. And this is why solitude is so great if done properly. It is time to look within, without distractions, either as or in the form of outside stimuli, activities, or even thoughts and daydreams. Solitude gives us a space to reflect on our past, present, and future. That is to say, to get to know ourselves by seeing patterns in our past, as well as deriving lessons and wisdom from our past mistakes, as well as to catch up with ourselves by thinking about our current situation, both inside and outside, by which I mean how we feel, what we've been going through, and the things that have been going on in our lives. It's also time to get clear about what one needs to do, what needs to be changed, etc. It's time to ask ourselves what it is that we want and where we're going in life. Without serious effort put into reflecting on our past successes, joys, mistakes, and sorrows, linking all of them with the present, and then projecting everything we learn onto the future, one will never truly know who one is, what one likes, dislikes, wants, or why. One will continue to live blindly, repeating his mistakes and chasing trends. But in addition to the very obvious part of self-knowledge, solitude is also space to learn to enjoy one's own company and presence. Second, it gives one time to process all the accumulated emotions stuck in one's nervous system by feeling them and letting them go, as David Hawking teaches in his book, Letting Go. Now, can you see how lack of these things and neglecting solitude is responsible for a lot of the suffering and the state of the world? Can you see how solitude is one of the most important and best tools for self-discovery and wisdom? Historically, all enlightened masters spent extended periods of time in solitude before their awakening. Examples of this are the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Jesus in the desert, Muhammad in the cave, Moses on the mountain. It is only in solitude that we truly discover who we are. It is the most beneficial habit there is, but also one of the hardest to do because of how much resistance there is against it. Now, how do you actually practice solitude? The instructions are as follows. You sit down in a room where you will not be disturbed. You will set a timer for 30 minutes at least, and then you will put your phone away somewhere where you won't be able to see it. You turn all of the screens and music off and don't do something. Instead of saying don't do anything or do nothing, I like saying don't do something. It's a lot more comprehensive. There's nothing to do. Become aware of your own presence and be there in your own company. Try to enjoy it. If you could, and you could spend 30 minutes just like that, it would be wonderful. However, something will usually come up, be it negative emotions, worries, or you'll think of some situation or problem. Whatever needs to be taken care of will come up, just like a difficult conversation you may need to have with a friend. Now, there will be uncomfortable things you need to deal with. There will most likely be resistance towards them. You'll likely acknowledge the problem and say, later, as we tend to do. In a short time, you will become aware of just how little you actually know yourself and how much unresolved stuff there is inside you. Not only emotionally, but practically. I mean, things like your constant procrastination, your addictions, bad habits, insecurities, lifestyle, etc. It's different for all of us. But whatever comes up, you deal with it. This is a space to deal with those things. Solitude is not meditation, nor is it contemplation. You don't need to force anything. Just be with yourself and things will come up. The essential thing is to avoid distractions. You shouldn't daydream or be thinking about what you need to do later or thinking about anything else. You don't need to concentrate on your breath or anything. You just need to be there with yourself. One's aim is to get something out of this. We're doing this because we want to better ourselves. And so that when you stand up, you know yourself a bit better and are a bit wiser than you were when you sat down. So I would recommend that you do this 30 minutes, and that once the 30 minutes are up, you spend a few extra minutes recalling the essential points of what you went through, and you distill this and define some of the concrete conclusions, lessons, changes, facts, or whatever it is. You should be able to state these lessons, what you've learned, into very clear sentences, just as I said in another video, things that are very concise. You might even get a notebook for that. I think it'd be useful to have a notebook so that at the end of the session you can write everything down. Now, one doesn't need to have a concrete lesson or conclusion every single time, since you may need to work on some issue more than once. However, you should be making some kind of progress. Extended periods of solitude, going from an entire day alone with no distractions, no activities and nothing, to over a month, as the enlightened masters did, are recommendable from time to time. Likewise, whenever there is a negative emotion or crisis, I recommend one retreats to solitude. And, on the one hand, feel the emotions, while, on the other, getting to understand what the issue might be, the reasons behind it, what's causing it, how this may be similar to something else. It may prove because this may prove to be a part of a pattern rather than a one-time thing. Though solitude, in the way I've described it so far, sounds as something to deal with negative things, it is, in fact, one of the most enjoyable activities there are. So, whenever you feel sad, desolate, depressed, confused, lonely, but also when you feel really good, really happy, you should go spend some time in solitude. And I really mean this. The first time I did this on purpose, it was, I think it's 3rd of January or so. I remember sitting down and intending to stay there for like half an hour, and I remember I stayed there for like 3-4 hours. It was just so great. When I finally decided to stand up, I was like, this was one of the greatest experiences in my life. It was absolutely great. So that was the text with some commentary, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you listen to this again and apply it. This is something I really hope you derive some value from. And yeah, that was the video. So like, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Have a good one.